Hey guys, welcome back to Kicking It with Kids. And today, part of our very special mini series, we have mental health and social media. So I'm Ashna.
I'm Nikki.
Hi.
I'm Anika.
And I'm also Anika. And today we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Goyal. And she's going to be talking to us about mental health and social media and answering some of the questions that we've had or are having.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
So, our first question is, how do you think social media affects the mental health of teenagers today, like on a broad scale?
You know, it's a really hot topic because so much is going on in the field of mental health. I think over the past several years, we're finding an increase in depression and anxiety in adolescents. And so it's kind of coincided with the explosion of social media at the same time. So a lot of times parents and family members and professionals even feel like, you know, what is social media creating this? Is social media making this happen? So there's actually a lot of studies on the connection between social media and mental health. And they have found, interestingly, there's an impact of it, but it doesn't seem to actually be the root cause of the increase in mental health. But it's complicated because, you know, social media contributes to our well-being or our struggles in different ways. So it's kind of, you really have to look at it, break it down and look at it.
So if you are actually struggling with social media and mental health, like how do you deal with that or get over it?
It's a good question. Well, you know, I think to answer that question, it's so individual for every person because there's pros and cons to social media. You know, social media contributes possibly to a decline in mental health based on how people are using it. So, as with anything else, in moderation and using things responsibly and knowing yourself and what your triggers are or what impacts you is really, really important when you figure out how to manage your social media. So it's going to be really different for everyone. I mean, there's some general things we look at, but before we talk about how to manage it, it's probably important to talk about, you know, how does it impact mental health? How can it?
Yeah.
That's actually really interesting. I kind of wanted to talk, you were talking earlier about how social media isn't the root cause of depression and mental health issues that come from it. But I was wondering, I know body dysmorphia and just kind of seeing people live some sort of really nice life, and people might want that. Those are not always things that we can't I guess avoid on social media. So I was wondering when you're faced with something that you're inevitably gonna find people with perfect bodies according to society, right? So how would you, no matter where you go on social media, whether it's one of your friends' accounts or whether you're followed by an influencer, how would you go around avoiding that or dealing with the triggers that come from that?
Yeah, and it's great you bring that up because body image issues are one of the factors that's been studied a lot, actually, because it does have a huge impact on people's body image. Because you're seeing, like you said, these perfect bodies or these fitness contests and challenges, and so there's a lot of that goes on social media, and it does impact people. You know, we look at these images, and in my day it was magazines was the big thing, looking at, you know, the airbrushed photos in magazines, and now there's, you know, it's a whole other level of photoshopped and perfected in so many ways, and so it can be really damaging. And that's, body image is one of the places where social media can impact people really negatively, especially adolescents who are, you know, just kind of starting to understand their bodies. And really, adolescence is a period where you're really building your sense of self. So it is really tricky. How do you avoid it? Or, you know, I guess how a person reacts to social media really depends on the person. So I might look at something and it may make me feel really bad about myself, and someone else may look at it and be like, well, that's just a picture. It's probably airbrushed and kind of no big deal. So it really is important for you to know yourself and for you to understand what things you personally need to avoid. Some people get really motivated by those challenges, and some people feel really frustrated when they see those things. So you may do things like make sure you're not uh, subscribing to those kinds of things that may be more sensitive to you, really kind of limiting and controlling your own social media. So it's not that your parents are doing it, but you're knowing yourself and you're knowing what things are healthy for you and what things are not healthy for you. And that's something I don't think a lot of people, even adults, really sit down and think about. We let ourselves be bombarded with whatever comes through our feed. And I think that's where it gets a little dangerous. But if you take a pause and you really think about, okay, well, you know what, when I look at pictures of mansions, I feel bad about my house. Or if I look at pictures of, models, I feel bad about myself versus looking at other things. Because there's a lot of positive content on social media too. So it's really important for each of us to know what is healthy for us and what is less healthy for us and manage it that way.
Yeah, I know that I had to take some like Snapchat breaks, and I think someone actually took a TikTok break in here. But yeah, so do you think that it's like necessary or like it's helpful or important to take those breaks, or do you think it's not necessary?
So I think it's really helpful, especially, I mean, if you're that in tune to yourself and you're realizing, wait a minute, every time I look at TikTok or I spend a certain amount of time on Instagram or whatever it is, Snapchat, I don't feel happy or something feels off. Hey, maybe I need to take a break. I mean, a break from anything is important. Social media bombards us with images and connection and all these things at a rate that our brain can't even process. I mean, it's just not natural. We're not wired to process it that way. So a lot of times I think it can touch on emotions and touch on things that we're not even consciously aware of. So I think breaks are great. It's a nice time to just refocus yourself and really get in tune with, well, how do I feel when I'm on a break? Do I feel better? Do I feel more relaxed? Or how can I manage my social media on a daily basis in a healthier way so that I don't ever really need a huge break?
Yeah, like I deleted TikTok for like 3 months, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought that like it did help me because I got to do like things that I actually like enjoy doing, and I wasn't like always on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
But like I'm not sure really how it affected my mental health.
Well, when you talk about one of the how does social media impact mental health? Because it does. So it's not necessarily been found that social media is the cause of depression or anxiety, but if you're engaging in it a lot, you're not you're not being as physical as you normally might be, and physicality is really important for our mental health. You're not having as many in-person social interactions as you might otherwise be. You're not engaging in other activities that you might otherwise enjoy, that bring you pleasure. And it's also been found that people who use a lot of social media, it really impacts their sleep negatively. So, there's the whole, I try not to sound cool, but FOMO, as you guys call it, the whole fear of missing out thing has caused some kids to be up at night, feeling like they need to respond quickly. And so that's a lot of stress and it's a lot of pressure and it's impacting your sleep. And if you're not sleeping, then I mean, sleep is one of the key ingredients of good mental health, good physical health too. So I think you're so right in those ways. You do miss out on other things when you're so focused on the social media.
I know we were talking about having breaks on social media, but I was wondering, like, since COVID and all, social media has become more of a necessity when it comes to like communicating with people, because obviously we can't go out and communicate with each other. So like this time period, is it like more likely that negative impacts of social media become more profound, or like even though that like because everybody's at home and we are all like kind of having to relate to that, that would be just kind of like something that brings us all together. So social media, like I don't know, I was wondering if any of us really have noticed like a trend in like positivity or negativity on social media.
So one of the advantages of social media has become glaringly apparent during the pandemic, you know, because imagine if we were all locked in our homes and we couldn't communicate with each other, you know, it would be really devastating. We couldn't be entertained by each other because there's a lot of creativity on social media. There's a lot of expression. I think that does it just highlights the positive points. I think the pandemic can highlight the positive points of social media because it isn't all bad. Again, it's about how each individual person learns to manage it. For people who struggle with social interactions in school and in person, it can be a great way to get connected with people in a more comfortable way, you know, and social connection is so important for development and for overall well-being. When you connect with someone socially, it does light up the pleasure centers in your brain. So when you do connect online, even, it does that. A lot of people who are in communities, LGBTQ communities, they find a lot of support often online, which is harder to access in person sometimes for various reasons. So I think there, you know, the positive parts of it have been highlighted also by the pandemic. But again, it is about how do I as an individual get in touch with what works for me, what's healthy for me, and how do I manage my social media based on that. And it's not, I mean, I can remember when, I don't know if this is still a thing with the Snapchat, the keeping the 100 or however many days of snaps. You know, that became really stressful for a lot of people, actually. You know, it's cute and fun at first, but then there's this like, oh my God, I didn't do my snaps today. And, you know, and so you have to really realize when things are becoming stressful for you or not.
So a question I had was, has there been like an increase or like a spike in mental health problems in teens since like the creation of social media, like comparatively to before it even existed?
There have in recent years, there has been, I'm going to kind of disconnect it from social media per se, because the jury's kind of still out on how that works. There hasn't been found any clear link, but there has been an increase in mental health issues over the last several years in adolescents. I think across the board, but especially in adolescents. I think I read like over 50% increase in suicide attempts. I mean, it's just been, you know, is it because we're hearing more? Is it because people are reporting more, or is something shifting? But I think they've found that, yeah, there's definitely an increase in mental health issues. There's a lot more awareness too now, which is such a great thing. So people are able to reach out and find help. But again, is it linked to social media? I think social media definitely can be a significant contributor. If you have a predisposition to anxiety or depression, or if you find yourself in a position where you're unable to manage it in a healthy way.
So with social media kind of being like a necessity, especially during these COVID times, I know it has like some negative aspects and some positive aspects. So finding a happy medium is kind of hard. So what would be your like ideal amount of time that we should be spending on social media?
I hesitate to talk about time specifically, because again, it's how you are framing your day and what is it doing for you. If you are someone who's online and you're getting a lot of support from groups or encouragement from those positive avenues, then I'd hesitate to say, hey, you should only do it like for an hour a day or whatever, because maybe that's something that's very helpful to you. But I do think that it's important to kind of make sure that you're not doing it to the point where you're not having balance in your life. So am I going to bed on time? Am I engaging in other activities? Am I actually meeting people? Am I getting out? Am I talking to my family at dinner, or am I on my phone? You know, and for each person to do that, I love for adolescents, kids, everyone to kind of come up with that for themselves, because so often the phone becomes a power struggle between parents and kids. It's like, even my kids will say, well, why do you think everything's because of my phone? You know, and I know it's not, but it's like, well, it's in your hand all the time, so I can pin it on that, you know. And to, if you manage it responsibly and do it in a way, good way for yourself, it kind of takes that component out too, because the phones are necessary. They are part of our lives. They're here for our betterment. So we really just have to learn how to manage that other piece of it. Maybe, you know, I'll sometimes recommend people not, well, it's my alarm, so I can't put it away. You know, I have to have it by my bed, you know, and so no, charge it somewhere else, buy a little alarm clock. Let's do it that way, so that when you go to bed, you're going to bed and you're not having that urge to check it all night, or if you just happen to wake up, you check it or whatever, because it is disruptive. The light is disruptive. The content can be disruptive. You know, take breaks in the day for yourself. Maybe you won't have to take a 3-month break completely if you are taking consistent breaks in the day. Like, you know what, from 6 to 8, I'm not going to touch my phone, and then I'm going to check it at 8, and then I'm going to be done with it by 10. Or, you know, for example, I know a lot happens after 10, but for you to kind of set those limits and boundaries for yourself is really, really important.
Well, when you were just talking about limits and boundaries, you said people who like find a lot of support online should like, it wouldn't be as like harmful. But again, and not again, but I wanted to bring up the fact that like isn't it true that like sometimes when people go online and find these support groups, it might just be because they want to, not maybe support groups, they're just like a place where they belong. It might be because they were trying to like escape their reality, and for how long we do that, like it could affect our mental health. So I guess my question is that like, is what point, like how long should we like try to, I guess, escape reality before like we come back to her? Not maybe like how long, but like, what do you think are some like mental markers that people might find that like when they're spending too much time on social media, or they're becoming slightly obsessive, or just basically depression, like if they want a different life, like their life is online rather than their life in real life?
Absolutely. I agree with that. That is a really good point, because social media, while it hasn't necessarily been found to be a cause of mental health issues, it can be really addictive, like in a true sense. It is addictive. So there's, again, certain activities that we do that light up the pleasure centers, just to simplify it. You know, certain neurotransmitters get released in our brain, and we feel good. And socially interacting with people does that. So, you know, you'll hang out with your friends, or you'll just talk to a friend and you'll feel good and happy and connected, and it just makes you feel good. So when you get a text or you're connecting with someone online, it's like that, kind of a little bit on steroids. So it's really, really enticing. You know, you get that little bing and you're like, oh, who texted me? And you feel good and happy and excited. And that feeling is, quote unquote, it can be addictive in that sense. So, you know, if so much of it for mental health in general, even if it's not just for social media, is about really being honest with yourself and really kind of looking at how much time am I spending on other things? Am I on there too much? Unfortunately, for someone who is looking for support online and only online, because they are struggling in their real world, it can be more addicting, in fact, because you can have this world there. And for that person, it's hard to find those markers within themselves. It's hard for them to self-assess. So hopefully they would have someone around to help them manage that as well, and let them know that, hey, you know what, you're kind of lost there. If you're not talking to anyone, if you're not socially interacting at all, if you're constantly on your phone, and that's kind of it can become an obsession. It is going to be super important to just start by doing things like putting it away at a certain time at night, and giving yourself breaks during the day, and then you can kind of check yourself with that, because it gives you a chance to understand, what am I doing in the time when I'm not on my phone or engaging with social media.
So I have a question, and this is like a very personal question because I have a hard time like getting off my phone. So we talked about breaks and how they are helpful. What should people do while taking those breaks to betterment themselves so then they can get back on?
So what kinds of things, if you're on that break and you're sitting there going, oh my God, like it's only like been 5 minutes and I have to take an hour break. What do I, this is hard. It's hard. It's hard for adults. So it's not just, adults don't admit that too often, but it is, it's a very enticing thing that's hard for adults to manage sometimes. And when you're an adolescent, you're just learning self-regulation is what we call it, when you're kind of figuring out what works for you and how to regulate things for you in your own life. I would really encourage that when you first start to take the breaks, that you're doing something else that you enjoy, so that break, it gets reinforced in your own mind. Like, oh, that was kind of nice that I, walked the dog, or I watched an episode of something that was just funny, or I read for a bit, whatever makes you feel good. I would really encourage that you try to make sure when you're taking a break that you're doing that, because that's going to reinforce taking the breaks as well.
So another question I had was, like, what age or like point in your life should you even join social media? Like, what point would you be able to manage your mental health and have be able to see the stuff on social media that may trigger you and still be able to deal with it?
I am finding that kids are getting phones younger and younger, and it's this whole world of stuff that I watched with my own daughter. The cell phone evolved from just something you could open and make a call to this thing where and so it was tricky as a parent to even try to figure out how to regulate it when we didn't know what it was becoming. I think, again, I hate to give an age because it's personal for everyone, and every family system kind of has to decide what works for them. And I think it's very individual. Maybe some exposure to it in middle school, because the problem is you can't isolate your kids from it either, because they need it. It is such an important way to stay socially connected. So kids really miss out. I guess the emphasis I would put on the age piece is, whenever you give it to them, whenever kids get it, there has to be some kind of an active effort to teach them how to manage the social media. Maybe more conversations, maybe starting out by looking at the social media together and kind of modeling for your children how to interpret things, how to manage the feelings that come up. And so from that perspective, I think no earlier than middle school for sure.
Another question I had was, what are like the common signs? Because a lot of people, they have don't know when they're on it too much, per se. What are the common signs of being on social media too much and knowing that it's affecting your mental health?
Is there people that you feel like are on it too much? And so what do you see in them?
I kind of see their mood changes a lot when they see a new thing.
Okay.
That's the main thing.
So it's true. There can be a lot of behavioral changes in people who are engaging in social media to excess. And again, it is about knowing that that's not your world. It's a piece of your world. but to kind of stay connected to your real world. And again, I think it is just really, really making a conscious effort to know that about yourself and do that for yourself.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I think that's a good place to wrap up, but is there anything you'd like to add before we say bye?
No, I really appreciate this conversation. I think it's wonderful that you guys are paying this attention to mental health issues. It's so important. The only thing I would really like to end with for your listeners is, we want to try to move towards taking the social media and the phone out of being that power struggle between parents and kids, and really kind of turning to family members and parents and support systems to learn how to manage it better, instead of it becoming this, I want it, no, you want it, and knowing yourself and really identifying what works for you and what's healthy for you and not. That's pretty much, I think, the message that I would like to get out there.
Thank you so much for coming today. Oh my
All
God,
right.
so helpful.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was nice to meet you all.
So thank you guys, all the viewers, for watching Kicking It with Kids. And in 2 weeks, we will be posting our last and final section of our mini series. So come back and watch it. Bye.